Backstreet Boys and NSYNC have the same studio. I think that's why they started out kind of very similar. But they diverged and evolved differently over time because each of them has their own distinct emotional center. We have this all mapped out, but let's go ahead back and start with Brian and Justin. Brian and Justin are the nucleus of their respective groups. And their differences on this color spectrum explains everything about how each group diverged in sound. This isn't important for you to memorize right now, but you can think of sort of the lighter colors here as outward expression and the colors down here as more inward expression. Now, two things should stand out immediately when you compare Justin and Brian. The first is that they both have massive emotional ranges. They both pretty much cover almost the whole wheel. And second is that they travel in opposite directions. Justin is moving mostly clockwise, and Brian is moving mostly counterclockwise. Okay, let's start with Justin. His base is here at 1 o'clock. Now, 1 o'clock was that sunburst color that was radiant charisma and magnetism and momentum. Those things define Justin. And because Justin was the emotional nucleus of NSYNC, those traits became their brand DNA. Right? NSYNC became known as the band that was doing genre blending, dynamic phrasing, that sort of pop R&B hybridization. All of that came from Justin's archetype, which is innovation and expansion and motion. And since NSYNC orbited around him, that sort of became their DNA expression. And that's really everything Justin's given us since NSYNC. You know, NSYNC has gone and they have this I Promise You, but when you really think of NSYNC, you think Tearing Up My Heart, right? Over time, Justin pulled the group into this hybrid, precision pop machine. Now, Brian, on the other hand, his base is this blue down here, which represents yearning and vulnerability and ache. And in terms of his suite being counterclockwise, there's only 3 dudes between both groups of all 10 who actually move in a counterclockwise motion. The significance of that is extraordinary, and I've spent a ton of time sort of figuring out why that is, and we'll get to that. Now, because Brian is BSB's nucleus, he's the one who pulls them in this direction. The energetic principles that BSB adopted from Brian became what we know them as. You know, that warm spiritual ache, that earnest sense of vulnerability and sincere storytelling. Backstreet's songs have almost a spiritual catharsis to them. That's because Brian is the center and he grounded them here. And they have songs like We've Got It Going On and Everybody and edgier stuff like that. But that's because Brian can also sweep up to kind of where Justin was. But the root of the Backstreet Boys is drowning in Shape and Siberia. That's all down here. And then the one thing you'll notice is that each of these guys actually does touch the other's home base. And that's where that wide emotional sweep comes in, right? Brian isn't just that golden toned, vulnerability vocalist, right? He also has this underrated fiery swagger to him. And Justin, he's not just this sunburst magnetic sort of walking kinetic spark. He is, but he's more than that too. What he gave you in This I Promise You and what he gave you in Gone, that does sweep around into these sort of darker colors. That's really what makes these two guys so special these profiles are worthy of being the core of an international pop group. You can hinge the entire compositional and emotional architecture of the groups on these two guys right here. Now, when you think of these colors at the top as outward expression, you can think of them in Jungian terms as the persona. These are the outer world masks that you wear, like your social function personality. The you who has to extend outward to meet the world where it's at. And you can think of the darker colors as the self. Those are your deeper psyche, your unconscious instincts, the truths about yourself that you don't always reveal and that the world has to be sort of let in to figure out about you. And these are sort of your two halves in a crude way. And because of where Justin and Brian are rooted, respectively, that sort of carried the emotional catharsis of each group. But of course, because both of them have wide emotional sweeps, and there's more than just one member in each group, there is tons and tons of overlap, and that's what makes this so much fun. Now, I mentioned earlier that counterclockwise is the most interesting part of this. Here's why. Most people don't start in depth and then move to the surface. You kind of get their surface layer first, and then you move deeper with them over time. But Brian and 2 other members actually don't give you that, right? They start you off at their innermost core, and then they move surface layer over time, right? Justin doesn't do that. Justin starts with that sort of outer fire and spark, and then he takes you deeper over time. And you know, this is exactly why I think men gravitated more towards Justin, more towards NSYNC. Like NSYNC's emotional arc matches what men are socially allowed to express. Like it mirrors that evolution from confidence first to vulnerability second. Because the reality is, as a male, if you're not confident and you're just vulnerable, well, then you look kind of weak. And there's actually real veritas to that. I'm not just saying it's a taboo. I think it's a taboo for a reason. Like, nobody likes weak men. Now, on the other hand, the Backstreet Boys are starting you off right here in this deep emotional exposure. That's really a place where a lot of guys either aren't allowed to access in themselves or just never give themselves permission to go do. You know, or maybe they haven't built up that confidence first, that inner fire first, that, you know, gives them the confidence to express those things without losing like their sense, their core of who they are. Like the ego persona of a man has to subside and allow some light to creep in, but only when you build that bed of confidence. And it takes us guys like a long time to figure that out. Now, the reality is that both of these groups actually started out with a similar vibe, and you can see why. I mean, there's tons of overlap. It's the same studio, same DNA really, and they were just kind of figuring out, you know, who's who. Justin was young, Brian was young too. And NSYNC sort of ran with that edgier vibe a little more and perfected it a little more. And that's why I refer to a song like We've Got It Going On as like an NSYNC type of song. Like sure, Backstreet Boys were first, but really it was the studio writing music for them, through them. And Backstreet Boys sort of trailblazed the path of Americanized pop, which took like Max Martin's like Swedish background and really created a hybrid American-European fusion. Whereas NSYNC sort of took that Europop vibe and really ran with it more. Like by the time we get to the Millennium album, you don't really feel that We've Got It Going On sort of Backstreet Boys group anymore. Like they've entirely pivoted from that. Like Backstreet Boys' emotional center, it hardened and crystallized around ache and drama and emotional expressiveness. Whereas NSYNC leaned deeper into like genre blending, and instead of like emotional expansion, they were like creatively expansive. That's why the group sounds so different by the second albums. And it was their home bases here in these photos that determined where they landed. Now here's where it gets really interesting. I would consider JC and AJ to be the emotional accelerants of each group. And these were the catalyzing members who pushed each respective group into their next sort of expressive tier. And you'll actually notice that they mirror the first two, but flipped. Like AJ is far closer to where Justin was, and JC is far closer to where Brian was. And this sort of balanced out both groups and gave them that similar vibe. Okay, but I'm gonna stop here. I'm considering this like episode 0 of this like mini series. Let's call it like a boy band anthropology mini series. Like what I don't know is like what I should do with all this like content, because each guy has their own profile. Like here's Justin's as an example. You know, we're gonna talk about their style, their vocal style, their tone, their strengths and weaknesses, and their sonic type. There's even a nice little breakdown. But the question I have for you guys is like, this is episode 0. So like I'm introducing the concept. I know I've put this in, like I put this color psychology in some of my episodes so far, and like people really love that. But like, what do I do with this? Like, do I make it a mini series? Do I like just weave it into my already like catalog series content? Or do I like do 10 individual reels covering each of the 10 guys? Like, you guys tell me, what do you want to see with this? Because I got it built out, ready to go.